You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
All right, we have a special guest today, Don Paris, PhD, a fellow published author, speaker, musician. Let's see, he gained my interest in his work with the being the guru of the SE5 1000. What is it called here? The world's most respected subtle energy instrument. And as a lot of you know, we are into subtle energies. Hence the name of our clinic, Body Electrician Clinic. So if Don, you want to unmute and join in the conversation, we'll it's good to have you here, Don.
Okay, Will, it's great to be here too. It's just phenomenal. I've been reading your book as well, and I think we've got a lot to share and a lot to talk about. We've gone down a lot of different pathways to get to the same place, and we just got a lot in common. It's just amazing. And so yeah, I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to share what I can with your audience. And I also have a lot of my listeners. I sent out a newsletter last night, so I've got a lot of my listeners tuning in as well.
That's awesome. So I came about you because I'm interested in the SE5. A friend and business partner has a couple of them, and I actually I saw one years ago. Looked similar in one of the older machines in the radionics, and I've always been interested since the 80s. Growing up on the farm, there was this like a subculture, underculture, if you will, in the community where I was raised, and there was a couple of old guys that had these radionics devices, and they were big. And they had like old picture tubes, the old TV tubes, and
right,
different, 100 different knobs. I mean, maybe not 100, but you know what I mean. So
some of them did, yeah.
And they would send pictures and soil samples, and they were doing all kinds of weird stuff with water, and
yeah.
And so, come across someone said, "Hey, you got to go check this SE5 out," and that's when I joined your newsletter last year, I think it was, and. And so I'm really fascinated with how machines are able to give us data about what's going on, around us.
Yeah, especially in the subtle energy field, because, science as such, what we think of as traditional science or academic science, let's put it that way, academic science.
Yeah.
They don't have the instrumentation to tap into subtle energies because basically they don't look for it. I think they could. I definitely think, with all the billions of dollars of research that we've poured into physical reality, even a small fraction of that could be put into subtle energy research, and we would have just literally miraculous stuff. And even our we're kind of garage inventors, realistically. I mean, none of us have any money. It's like that, I mean, we don't. No funding. No, yeah. I mean, we live. We live, but we don't have funding of of a $250 million or something to go research on a particular project or even to develop some of the equipment. And so it's been definitely shoestring. Garage inventors for the last 100 years. It's been around for 100 years. And so subtle energies, we've kind of had to fly by the seat of our pants and do everything by experiment and results. And I know that in academics, that's the principle of science, but they don't always follow that. Basically, they do it more like this. Funding, experiment. Okay, maybe some results. Well, more funding, experiment.
Yeah.
So they go where the funding is, and understandably, but it's not how we've developed all of this technology. And I've been very fortunate to have met a PhD physicist. Dr. Willard Frank is what he went by, which I wrote about in my book, but his name was Bill Lawson on a personal level. William Francis Lawson, and he kind of went by Willard Frank, which was kind of fun. But he was a PhD physicist and had developed a lot of he basically made his living from high-end audio patents is what he told me. I never did actually tweak it out of him which patents he got, but so
you worked under him or in as a apprentice or just something on that level?
Yeah, we worked together for about 25 years actually, very closely, and he was my mentor, one of my mentors and teachers, and we just spent a lot of time together and working on different ideas and improvements and experiments, and just to see what we could do in this realm. And the SE5 was his fifth instrument. By the time I met him, he had already developed 4 other instruments, and one was the Vitatron, the Nutritron, the Digitron, and I think there was one more which I can't remember what it was called. And these were real basic, well, not basic, but they were the more standard radionic equipment, analog equipment, until he got to the Digitron. And the Digitron was really was the world's first digital radionic instrument. And I didn't personally work with the Digitron because I came in right when the SE5 just came out. But my other teacher, Dr. Greg Morgan, he worked with the Digitron for several years, and he had a very interesting story of how he got into this. He had no interest in this kind of stuff at all to begin with. He worked in the government doing government grants, writing government grants or processing them for the government, and for different projects or whatever. And he even wrote a book on that, how to get federal grants or something like that. I don't remember the exact title. So he was really deep into the normal world as such, and we call it normal.
Right. So that was, is he on the government here in the United States doing network or abroad?
Yeah, no, he's in the U.S. and he was just working for the U.S. government in the grant department, and all of a sudden he basically lost motor functions and brain functions, and they put him on full disability. He was he couldn't hardly do anything.
Oh, wow.
And he was completely, couldn't work. He could barely get out of bed, and his brain was just totally fritzed. And, he went to all these doctors, and of course, the government has programs, for employees and stuff, but he went through all the doctors. They had no idea what happened to him. And he was only 38 years old. This guy wasn't old or anything.
Oh, my.
And he heard about this person that said, "Oh, there's this instrument, and called the Digitron, and you should go check it out, and maybe they can figure it out." And so he went to this practitioner, and I don't actually know who that was back then, but somebody had an instrument. And, now this gets a little bit technical, and you might know about this, but the listeners probably won't. But in the old radionic system, they had 2 banks of dials, the original 2-bank ones. And the banks mean you'd have a number set on the left and a number set on the right. And the ones on the left, when you dialed those in, would be the condition. You'd look it up on a chart and find out what condition that related to. And on the right-hand side would be the location. It's called conditional location. And we still teach this, even today, but it's really, comes way back. We're talking this is, 80 years old, this method. And so he had a practitioner do the left-hand, right-hand dial analysis, and they came up with the brain, for where the location was and fly larvae in his brain. And, you know, I mean, that sounds totally wacky. And, you know, it's like, how would he get fly larvae in his brain, right? But it didn't really matter to him what they said, because then they used it in the balancing mode to well, let's call it, eliminate the information from his system to get his subtle energies balanced out so that his body could go into a healing mode. And so they balanced out these we call it a tuning. It's a number tuning that, you know, the left-hand numbers and the right-hand numbers. This tuning frequency, they dialed into this fly larva in the brain and then balanced it. And within like just even 10 days, I think it was, he said, he was thinking again, and his motor functions came back, and he became a normal person. And of course, this just freaked him out. I mean, freaked him out. It was like, because nobody touched him, right? I mean, they just dialed in with these dials. They put a photograph of him in the instrument, right? So first he's thinking this is just way out there, woo-woo stuff. Never heard of anything like this, but he went along with it, and it worked. And so then he started investigating it. And interestingly enough, after his brain functions came back, and I don't know how much later, but he was sitting kind of in meditation one day, and he thought back, and he remembered that about a year before this happened, he was laying on a beach, and he got attacked by sandflies, and they just went in his ears and his eyes and his nose and his mouth, and I mean just completely covered his head. You know, they're like these swarms do. And he was trying to get him off his face and everything. And what he concluded is that probably is what happened. They got up into his nasal passages and in his ears and everything else. And somehow they laid some eggs in there, and the larva went into his brain. Now, obviously, none of this is provable. It could be all placebo, you know. But it happened, and he believed it, you know. So, you know, and that is a big part of well, he didn't believe it at first that it was going to do anything, but he believed it after it worked.
Right, something happened.
Yeah, and so he started, you know, investigating it and got into it and became an amazing practitioner. I mean, he just did miracles.
Was he using the Digitron?
Yeah, at that time he started with the Digitron. This was before the SE5 came out. And then when the SE5 came out, of course, he switched over to the SE5 because it was much easier to use and smaller and portable, and you know, you could store more programs in it. And it was, you know, really cat's meow when it came out in 1986. And yeah, it was just it was a real breakthrough. You know, it was really small, and you could store little programs in it. You could make, you know, you could sequence a whole bunch of different tunings. Not just one dial into one thing, but you could go and do an analysis and find out, you know, like how are the different chakras, and then which organs are related to the chakras, and how does that all fit together, and then you could store all that in a little computer that was on top of the SE5, and then be able to put it into the balance mode, and it would sequence one tuning after another and send out then balance each one of those tunings one after the other after the other. And that was major breakthrough, that's for sure.
So in a simplistic a little bit of simplistic explanation, so the machine's able to pick up where there's disharmony or imbalance, and then create the harmony, the balance, and feed it back to you.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good way of describing it. Now, let me clarify one aspect, though. When you said the instrument does that, the instrument actually is more like an amplifier. So let me put it like in a musical term, because since I'm a musician. Okay, so you've got a microphone, right? And that analogy would be like saying, well, the microphone can have the singer sing a particular song. You know, the microphone isn't going to do anything without the singer there. So the operator is part of the entire system here. It is when we're talking about subtle energies, I don't like to use the word psychic, but there is a extra sensory
Intuition.
intuition and extrasensory part that plays into this, because we're working with subtle energies which are, not physical as such. I mean, they're non-physical. They go beyond the physical. They're beyond physical. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so the operator is actually an antenna as well. Like, for example, when we put in a photograph of a field of corn, let's say, and we want to that field of corn, we don't have to be next to it. In fact, it could be in South Dakota, and I can be in Washington State, and somebody can send me a picture of the corn, and I can tune in and find out if there are bugs present, or chemicals present, or if it's in good shape, or if it's genetically modified, or all those things. I can dial in those frequencies into the SE5 and get a really accurate reading of what's going on currently in real time with that field of corn. And people do this all the time. There are actually people that have businesses that are built around helping farmers analyze what's going on in the soil and what's going on in the plants, and also helping with pests and animals. I got a really interesting letter the other day from one of my clients, and I thought this was a real creative solution to this. So this one ranch, farm and ranch, they were having problems with losing chickens from the hawks. So hawks would, circle around, and they would come down and grab the chickens, and they were losing about 4 to 6 chickens a week, which is, that's a lot of money when you're talking about losing your chickens.
Right.
And so I thought he came up with a real creative solution. Instead of trying to protect the chickens or come up with ways of, fencing them in or whatever, what he did was he got a sample photo of more hawks, and so he broadcast it out. He was sending out these frequencies that there were lots of hawks circling around the area. So he got an aerial photograph of the farm, and then he kept sending the information out that there are lots of hawks. Well, hawks are very territorial.
Right.
So the other hawks, the real hawks, not the subtle energy hawks, but the physical hawks, wouldn't come around anymore because there were too many hawks around. And so this was, I think when the letter, I have to look that letter up, but I think it was about 3 months later, they had not lost one more chicken since he started doing the balancing.
Just broadcasting for that.
Yeah.
Sending the information out.
Sending the information that there are lots of hawks around, and so the real hawks thought there were too many, and they went hunting somewhere else.
That's awesome.
I know.
That's That's creative.
It's very creative. I mean, I get these letters from people, and because I'm learning. I've been doing this for over 30 years, and I learn all the time by listening to the people out there doing the hands-on work. And I'm mostly in development now. I don't actually work on clients anymore, or take on jobs like farms or animals or stuff. I did all that when I started, but then I got more into teaching and developing and creating courses and stuff like that to help people learn how to do this. I figured I'd be more effective with those skills than doing the hands-on work myself. I mean, of course, I use it for myself and my friends and family all the time. I've always got something going, but
it's kind of the old analogy about it's rather than giving fish away to someone, teaching people how to fish.
Exactly, and that was one of the analogies that happened. It was interesting because my wife and I had set up a little clinic, and we had 2 SE5s at the time, which was really stretching our budget back then, because we were young and living in a little tiny rental house of 400 square feet. but we'd set up one room as a clinic room. We did have a little room that we could set up, and so we were having people coming in, and we worked on a lot of people and had really great results. It was interesting to watch. And then we were sitting at the kitchen table one day, and we just got to talking about it, and I said, I just don't feel like we're going to change the world this way. I mean, and she said something like, yeah, and I don't really like all these sick people showing up at our house, And right then, the plug for the SE5 just fell out of the wall and landed on the chair next to us, and we looked at each other and went, oh, that's a sign. And so that was back in like, oh geez, it must have been about 1980, 89 maybe, and we both committed to changing course and teaching people instead. And so now I've taught people in way more than 30 countries around the world, and
with the SE5.
Yeah, with the SE5, yeah. And
you have other teaching too as well, again, subtle energy, but not with the machine, but with from the quantum.
Right, exactly. And so as things developed over time, we did both of these things all together. We had trained with Dr. Vern Wolf, V. Vernon Wolf, who developed a process called holodynamics, which is based on quantum psychology and quantum transformation. And again, this was back in the late 80s when nobody had really heard of quantum, and this guy has like 4 PhDs, and he's just incredible guy. So we actually studied with him for about 4 years while we were doing the SE5 too, because it all dovetailed so well together to do the personal growth side of it and to do the hands-on technical side of it. Right. But as things kind of started growing and everything kept growing over the years, she specialized more in the personal growth side of it, and I took over the technology side. And so we still work side by side all the time, but she really has developed that into an art form. In her new book, Dream Big, The Universe is Listening, she goes into depth about a lot of these stories from people and personal experiences too, of how to shift the quantum field, how to change reality realistically. That's what we're doing with all of this stuff. It looks like maybe we think of it as healing or as gathering information from a distance, or these, like Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. But realistically, what we've come to conclude is that we actually shift from one parallel universe into another, basically, is what we're doing. So there's one universe where we are not healthy, and there's another universe where we're healthy, and those slide very subtly with these subtle energy fields. You're sliding all of the time from one universe to another, and it looks stable. It very much looks stable, but the quantum field is blinking off and on something like 50 billion times a second, or some. That's what physicists have guessed at.
Wow.
That the universe actually goes into existence and out of existence 50 billion times per second. So in between those time frames, even a light blinking at 60 cycles per second, we don't see it flickering. So if it's 50 billion times a second flickering on and off, you wouldn't see the universe ever disappearing, right?
Right.
So, but you can, in your mind, learn how to kind of slow everything down and then shift from one universe to the next, to the next, to the next. And it's subtle. It is subtle. It's so subtle that you think that you're still sitting in the same place, but you can shift from one reality state to another reality state. And we've done it so many times that it's part of our daily life and the way we just live life. We assume that's how it works, and life reflects that back to us. But there are a lot of miracle stories in that. Dream Big, The Universe is Listening. I love that title, and I love the book. And she did an interview with Jack Canfield from who wrote the Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Uh-huh.
And this was actually before she published her book. But she had mentioned that word in the interview of Dream Big, The Universe is Listening. He said, "Oh, that's a great title for a book." and It's like, well, that is the title of the next book. But anyway, that was before it came out. And so we did publish it as Dream Big, the Universe is Listening. And
is there a website that people could check out? If you can, is there a way that people could like go check that information out?
I think we actually have DreamBigTheUniverseIsListening.com. Let me just check that while we're talking. But her name is Ilona Selke. She has a different last name than I do, Selke. And so if you just go to IlonaSelke.com, but I think Dream Big. I want to just try this. UniverseIsListening.com. And that'll take you to Living from Vision. That's the name of our company, and livingfromvision.com is where it takes you to. But
okay,
Living from Vision is kind of what we culminated that encompasses the SE5 and everything. That's the name of our company is Living from Vision, but the course itself is called Living from Vision, and it uses these quantum principles and actually teaches people in a simple way of thinking of goal setting and manifesting, but it's much deeper than that. We actually teach people how to shift from one universe to another universe, but maybe we don't quite describe it that way in this particular aspect. But in her books, she does. She's written several books, and really.
I've been doing some meditation now for guided meditation of Dr. Joe Dispenza's, and it talks. How you're actually activating certain glands and certain hormonal secretions in your body, and then you're projecting out your future. So you're creating the future, living into it, and it's really been working. I checked out your website the other night, Living from Vision, and I'm like, wow, this is like what we're doing right now, just from a little different language, really.
Yep. Yeah. We've been doing this for, well, like I said, since I think 87 is when we met Dr. Vern Wolf and Dr. Rod Newton, who also wrote the course Living from Vision. And Ilona has updated it and kept adding new material to keep it current. But yeah, we've been using it ourselves, consistently for over 30 years, and it's how we've created our life around ourselves. I mean, I know you were just writing about our retreat center in Bali. We've built a retreat resort in Bali for health and wellness and meditation and yoga and stuff like that. And we just use these visioning skills regularly, pretty much all the time. Simple stuff to do. It's but discipline is the key. It's learning how to enjoy discipline and getting up and doing your morning exercises and doing the things that make you feel really healthy and really good. And I think that's a key to health. I know, looking in your book a little bit, you focus a lot on the nutritional side of it, and that is definitely one part. But we also have to move our bodies and keep the pumps working.
Right.
I think that's a real vital aspect of staying healthy and flexible. But a lot of what you talk about in your book is so accurate about how, what are food substances, what are non-food substances, and that is something that in our day and age right here, it's challenging to stay away from non-foods,
Especially when it's everywhere, especially the genetic modified crap.
Well, and then on top of that, it's like adding that on top of the pyramid of non-foods. But actually, I did do a talk once on non-foods and stuff like that. I'll get that up on our training courses. So you said in your email you said you had looked at some of the courses that I have online.
Yeah, the Living from Vision.
Oh, that's the one you looked at. Okay.
Yeah, I was spending some time there because over the last few years, that book was actually put together a few years ago, and so I've been moving from the physical into the non-physical for health.
Uh-huh.
What's really, because it seemed to be at first, I started out with herbs, back in the 90s, and really managing symptoms with herbs, and then it went to food and non-food, in that realm, and then we were helping quite a few people, but there was this like 20% that just didn't respond, didn't matter what they ate or how we changed things or herbs or whatever. So then we started going into the mind, into the subtle energies, and really into the hormones. And we have this epidemic of stressor hormone production that is insane right now.
Yeah, those stressor hormones are, they're actually easy to calm down, but they're addictive. They make us feel like like everything's happening all at once, and you get into this fight or flight response and the adrenaline, and if people don't have that, if they calm down, they feel antsy, because they don't have this push for a little while. It's actually almost an addictive cycle, and of course caffeine is one of those things that drives the adrenals and pumps the system up. And so when people start feeling that lack, let's say, or the down a little, coming down a little bit from that high, they reach for a cup of coffee or a soft drink with caffeine in it, and to get back up there, and that gets into a circle and a cycle. I don't drink any coffee. I haven't drank coffee for 25 years or something. I used to like it, but or even tea with caffeine. It overdrives my system, and I realized that. But the number one thing to do to start reducing the cortisol, which is one of the stress hormones, is meditation. And I'm big on I started meditating when I was 18, so that's that's a while back now, 45 years. Yeah, I'm 63 now, and still practicing meditation. And I started with transcendental meditation back then. Well, I mean, I started on my own, and then I did take a course in transcendental meditation, and basically based on the studies that they had done about reducing stress and calming down. My dad also we'd read an article in Scientific American back in this would have been about 1973, I think, and they had an article on transcendental meditation in Scientific American, and they actually did these studies to show how much you can reduce your stress levels and change your own hormonal balance through meditation. And so he was interested, and I was interested, and so I took the course, and I taught him, and saved a little money. I figured if I could go through it first and teach him, and it really did help, and it was a good beginning. It's meditation is something that is a lifelong learning process. It's the techniques are very, very simple of how to calm the mind and then drop deeper. But then as I developed more, I found that more research, like with some of the Tibetan monks and the Monroe Institute, I had gotten to know the daughter of Robert Monroe, and she was telling us that they did some research, brainwave research, on some Tibetan monks, and instead of lowering the brainwaves, normally like in transcendental meditation, you go into an alpha state. You go, well, just for those that maybe don't know the brainwaves, delta is like deep sleep, right? And then that's like from 2 hertz down to 0 hertz, right down there,
Right down, yeah.
Yeah, and then like from 2 to 4 is what we call theta, the theta brainwave state, and that's like the hypnagogic state, when you're just waking up but you're still dreaming. You can still see all kinds of crazy things, but you're already kind of awake, and that's in the theta state. Or if you're sitting and you're getting tired and your head drops and starts nodding down by itself, you're just dipping into theta, around 4 hertz cycles per second. So you can measure these on a brainwave measuring device, an EEG, electroencephalograph. And then from 4 to 8 is like alpha. They call it the alpha state, and that's like a meditative state. And actually, your brain will go into that while watching television, for example. We go into an alpha brainwave state, which alpha is good, but advertisers know this. That's also the suggestive state. So when a hypnotist takes you into a hypnotic state, they drop your brainwaves down normally just into the alpha range and maybe into the theta. Sometimes people go completely out, but in most hypnosis these days, they just take people down into the lower alpha state and make the suggestions, and the subconscious then is more open to hearing these suggestions and integrating them into the conscious mind. And so people can stop smoking and do all these different things just with 1 or 2 hypnosis sessions, which is pretty amazing. But advertisers know this, that when you watch television, your brainwaves drop naturally down into the alpha state. And so you're highly suggestive at that point. And that's why they use all the images and the sounds and the commands, basically, in the advertisements that they do. Like, my wife and I met, when we met 35 years ago, both of us had already thrown our televisions out because we realized that they were using these processes to hypnotize people to buy products, basically.
Right. They drive the suggestion right into you. It's programming. It's called programming for a reason.
That's right, right. And there was a great book called The 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television that came out back in the 80s. And Mother Earth News had published the entire book, one section at a time. They did it over 4 issues. And I threw my television out after the first issue. I'm going, oh my goodness, I didn't know that all of this was going on. But this guy had worked in the advertising industry and knew how they did all this stuff. And so he exposed it in a book called The 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television. And the book didn't really do that well, basically because he was not willing to go on television to promote his own book.
You're right.
Yeah, but I think that's still available. It might still be available on Amazon, but it's well worth reading. It's just a wealth of subliminal advertising and how it fits and works and what they do with it, and oh my goodness. But
so manipulating through the brain waves and the hormonal states.
Right. So then above alpha is the beta state, which is what we're in right now as we're talking, and we're awake, and that's somewhere between 8 and up to 22 hertz, about 22 cycles per second in our brain waves. But then what Laurie Monroe had told me is that that they were doing these brainwave studies on these Tibetan monks, and instead of lowering their brain waves, they would go into what now is called gamma. Before, we didn't even have a name for it. But since they started doing this research, they would bring their brainwave frequencies up to as high as like 44, 48 hertz. I mean, it's just like, hyper-consciousness. And so I started practicing some of those techniques and learning how to raise my brainwave frequency to go into this hyper state of consciousness instead of a more relaxed state. And it has some of the same effects in terms of reducing stress and going into a relaxed mode. But you get a lot more, how would I call it? It creates a bigger overview. Let's call it that.
Is it like tapping? Is that a better place to that frequency level to tap into the information field where your consciousness can give and receive information?
Well, you can do it in either direction. I also worked with Joe McMoneagle, who was, one of the world's top remote viewers, and he also had studied with Bob Monroe, and taught actually at the Monroe Institute, and that's where I got to meet with him, and they were doing more of the lower brainwave state and going into the alpha, and then moving to in the beginning to do remote viewing, where he would kind of go to the place and look around and then come back. Then later, as they start going into hyper awareness states, then you don't go anywhere. The information just comes to you because you're, I don't know, for lack of better words, let's just say you become one with the universe, or everything is one. So you don't really become one, you're already one. We're already one. All of us are already one with the universe. We're not, you don't become one with the universe,
right.
but
you're
you can
conscious of it.
You become conscious that there is only one, that there's only one, and so everything is realistically, where everything is all in this same time space coordinate. I mean, there is no time space, is what happens. There's nowhere for you to go. And so you can get more information in the moment by just being here.
Being present.
Being present. It's kind of a weird thing. When we talk about these in words, it sounds really strange, but it's very simple. But it's a matter of learning how to turn on the limbic brain, in the back part of the head. These deeper brainstem parts can awaken, and you can raise your frequency up, and then a lot of cool things happen. Every brainwave state has its own properties. There's another I studied also with Viana Stiebel, who developed the theta healing technique, and theta healing. She drops people into theta instead of alpha, a little bit deeper than alpha, but still on the border. But your head, you can watch when you're in theta because your head starts to want to nod. And that technique, I've just seen miracles. I mean, really, literally miracles with that technique. It really does work. You get people into theta and do some of these practice exercises that are even in her books. She even talks about it in her books. But it's better to learn it hands-on with teachers, I think. But
my whole interest in this was really kind of selfish because I was a construction. I built houses and had a lot of injuries to my head, and actually got hit by a semi. And it had a lot of damage to my head and my brain, and my midbrain, my amygdala got stuck on basically overproduction, full-time production of cortisol.
Oh my goodness.
Hormones, and
Whoa.
for years, and so it really was a problem, and so that led me into how to get that shut off, and then discovering that a lot of people have become damaged with vaccines and injuries and drugs, recreational drugs, pharmaceutical drugs. They actually damage our brain, and so that has been led the last few years into how to shut that, how to dysregulate or shut down the stressor hormones and get to get all of the whole brain to function.
Right.
And so that has been that's part of the reason why I'm interested in the machine, your machine, because of the way it has the ability to amplify, to cause the brain to do specific things, like turn down the amygdala. That to me,
right.
At least that's my hypothesis. I kind of wanted to talk about it today. I know
Sure.
We did not prep for this.
No, that's cool. No, we can jump. We can kind of go anywhere. Like I said, I've been doing this for about 30 years, a little bit more than 30 years, and so I've seen. I haven't seen everything out there yet, but I've seen a lot. And and when we talk about these things, especially to a newcomer, it sounds like the sky's the limit. That this is like an unlimited. You've got unlimited power once you have this instrument. You can just type in what you want, and it works, and it happens. And I have to say, it does appear that way, but it does have limitations, and those are things that you have to kind of discover on your own. It's you know, they used to call it the miracle black box because it used to be black, and you know,
Right.
and so it kind of got that reputation. And I have seen a lot of miracles, but most of the time it's a lot of work to get things to happen. You have to really, you know, stay with it and do an analysis and you know, and then balance and then adjust course and you know, you know, I'm and then you have these other things like I had this guy come. I was teaching a workshop in India, and this guy flew from the other side of India. He had heard about me coming, so he flew all the way from Chennai to where I was teaching in Mumbai, and he was a doctor himself. He was a medical doctor, and he'd heard about the SE5, and so I figured he wanted to know about the SE5. And he comes up and he said, "Well, really, what I came here for is I've had this problem." And he'd had this stomach pain for 4 years. He'd been to all the hospitals, all the specialists. He was, you know, he was a medical doctor himself. He said, "Nobody can find anything, and I'm just kind of looking to see if this might be able to help me, you know." And I said, "Well, you know, I don't really work on people, but I can give you a demo, and we'll see what happens, you know. Maybe I'll get lucky." And so what I did was I went through his chakras first, the 7 major chakras, you know, the crown chakra, the brow chakra, throat chakra, heart chakra, solar plexus, the spleen chakra, and the sacral chakra, and root chakra. And so I went through the 7 chakras, and then we have a list of related organs to that. And so what I found was one of his chakras was low, and I went and looked to see which organs were related to that. Now, this comes from from a perspective of these chakra energy centers, which comes from India. So that was already, you know, he already understood that, which was good. In the West, you know, when I was teaching meditation back in the early 70s, you know, people had never heard of chakras. So that was one of the first things we talked about: karma, reincarnation, and chakras. People had never heard of these things. And now pretty much everybody has heard of what a chakra is. And just for those of you that don't, the 7 major chakras, according to Indian philosophy, are the energy transducers or transformers that change. They take cosmic energy in from the cosmos, this energy that's coming all the time from space, if you want to call it that, but it's inner and outer space, and it changes it from energy into cosmic energy into physical energy, and feeds the organs, literally feeds the organs. This is according to Indian philosophy. And there are actually people in India that don't consume any food whatsoever. They're called breatharians. And one of the guys, I know he went to Germany, and he was in the hospital for like 200 or 300 days, and so they monitored him 24/7, and he never ate a bit of food, but was having normal bowel movements. I read about this in a German magazine. And so these people really exist. I mean, I've met some of them myself as well, but I only met them, so there was no way I could test them for 3 or 5 months to see if they really do or don't eat. But this one study in a hospital in Germany, they really did that. So there are people that don't actually consume food to transform energy into physical matter. And this guy was totally healthy and vital, not even just healthy, he's vital, And what they do is they then activate their chakras even more through certain types of spiritual exercises to bring this energy into their system and transform it then into physical food is what we would call it, But that's not what happens when we digest food anyway. I mean, what we're doing in our digestive system is converting physical matter into energy, right?
Right, or extracting the energy out of what we're eating.
That's what I mean, yeah. It's converting it or extracting it, exactly. And so if you do that consciously and you figure out how to extract energy directly from the cosmos, then that process becomes kind of not necessary or secondary at least. Now, so I did this analysis. I went through his chakras, and one of his chakras was low, and I checked the related organs, and I found this blockage, or whatever you want to call it, in his sigmoid flexure. Now, I'm not a trained medical person, and so a lot of these words that I come across in the database are medical terms, which I don't even know what they are. You know, I'm not a trained medical person. I've never studied anatomy and physiology and all that stuff. I just go with whatever I find with my readings. And so I said, well, you know, what I'm getting is the sigmoid flexure is where the blockage is, and you know, I said, where is that? You know, I'm sorry, but I'm just, you know, it's not my expertise to know everything about the body. And so he said, oh, it's, you know, it's down in the stomach area or whatever. And I said, well, okay, well, let me balance it and see what happens. So we balanced that, and the next day he came by and he said, you know, this is the first day, the very first day that he had been out of pain in 4 years. Very first day. And so I said, well, you know, I think we got lucky, but, you know, let's see what happens, because we don't know, you know. So I said, well, I'll balance it a couple more times for you, just to make sure. And then he did fly home, but he did follow up with me 6 weeks later, and the pain never returned. So he was, you know, flying off the ceiling and of course thinking this is the magic black box, even though it's white now. And you do have experiences like that, but that's not every day. Mostly it's like this. I would say more regularly is, you know, somebody has whatever complaint it is, and what we look for is the root cause. We don't really care about symptoms, you know. I mean, right. Symptoms are signals and alarm signals, and they're good to listen to. But to try to go backwards and try to get rid of the symptom to get back to the root cause is like, it doesn't work very well.
That's where I love the machine, so you can actually follow, like you're using a diagram or whatever, where with the machinery we have, right. It gives us an area, and we just follow the trail like the breadcrumbs following symptoms backwards until, oh, there's the cause right there.
Exactly. And we have different techniques, which I teach in some of my courses, how to get right back to the root cause real quickly. And that's when you can, you know, then sometimes it takes time. You've got time because you're several layers in from the symptom. So people don't always see symptom relief right away because they're symptoms. They're not the cause.
Do you find that frustrating with your clients or the people that you deal with? Because we do. Because yes. They say, "Oh, my stomach hurts,"
right?
You know, and my stomach hasn't, you know, but I'm seeing clearer. I don't have brain fog, but my stomach still hurts.
Right. Just hang in there. And
yeah.
So what we learned, like for example, in homeopathy, homeopathy is basically information medicine also. So right. What we're working with is basically informational fields with the SE5, and informational fields are re-informing the energetic field. You know, there's information. We think of information of being like in the DNA, while the DNA sequences the information, but that's like saying your hard drive, you know, has the information in it. You know, it's just dots and dashes. You know, there's no information as such. Now we can unencode that information and get meaning out of it, but it takes consciousness to understand what meaning is. You don't get meaning without consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're working with really are consciousness interactive informational fields. That's the best way I can describe it. After working with this for 30 years, we're working with consciousness interactive informational fields. Homeopathy works the same way. And so when I was studying some in homeopathy, I found that they work from the inside to the outside. And the skin is, especially if a person comes in with a skin problem, that's going to be the last symptom to go away. Right. Because they're working from the inside to the outside, and everything's pushing itself outward. So they work from the inside, and eventually then when the skin clears up, they know they've got a clean slate. And that's what I remember from my limited training in homeopathy. It's limited, but I really did enjoy it, and this was even before the SE5.
we have a break coming up here momentarily.
Cool.
And so when we go on to the break, if you can mute your phone, your mic, and then we'll come back after that. And again, I'm not sure if the music is working very well yet.
I heard something before, just kind of scratchy stuff. And how long is the break, Will?
I believe it's like 3-4 minutes, something like that.
Okay, good. Enough time to run to the bathroom and back, right?
The bathroom. So
Okay, good.
it should be according to my clock. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute my phone right now, or my mic, and then we'll come in just after that. Okay?
Okay, we'll be back in a couple minutes.
Yeah, we'll be back. Thank you, Don.
Okay.
Did you ever feel that things were not quite right? That everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
Ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
downloaded to your brain,
then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
and I'm Mackie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Enjoy your
Extra big ass fries.
You didn't give me no fries. I got an empty box.
Would you like another?
Extra big ass fries.
I said I didn't get any.
Thank you. Your account has been charged. Your balance is 0. Please
What?
come back when you can afford to
Oh,
make
no,
a purchase.
no.
I'm sorry you're having
Come
trouble.
on. My kids
sorry
are
you're
starving.
Thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio. Here at Revolution Radio, we believe in freedom of ideas, freedom of speech, but above all, we believe in freedom of existence through self-reliance. This station is 100% listener supported, and as a fundraising promotion, I have a kick-ass free gift for a $100 donation. 35,000 seeds. 25 years in the freezer. Long-term storable, 54 different varieties. So if food prices go crazy, the shit hits the fan, or if you just want to save tons of money every year by creating your own food like I do, grab our seed pack special. Just look for the banner on the homepage at freedomslips.com. Don't be a statistic. Don't be part of the problem. Be part of the solution. We need, as humans, to start taking care of ourselves and not depending on the megacorps to provide unhealthy, nasty food. Included in this package is also a DVD with 900 survival and off-grid living documents and the offline home canning how to do everything website all on the DVD. So when you're growing all that food, you know how to can it, store it, preserve it, etc. with all these documents. So thank you for tuning in to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I hope that you will pick up this package and start learning to be free. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps and freedom is one seed that needs to be planted.
What we do in life, it goes in eternity.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
All right. Okay, I guess I clicked the wrong button. All right, Don, did you make it through the break?
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah.
Okay, did you hear anything? Because
I heard some noise for a while, but I think it's probably done by now. You probably want to turn your video back off.
Yeah, is my video on?
Yeah, it just turned on, so.
Oh my gosh, can you believe that?
There we go. Okay.
Yes. So, anyhow, just a moment, Don. So this is the largest listener-sponsored network on the web. You're hearing us on Revolution.radio and FreedomSlips.com. So if you're listening, your part is to help figure out a way to sponsor, listener-sponsored. You know what I'm saying? So, anyhow, back to the show, Don.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple of things I was thinking about, during the break. One thing I wanted to bring up for people is, when we talk about this instrumentation and a lot of this sounds very like medical. It is not a medical instrument. It's an experimental research instrument, and it's it's labeled for experimental research only because it's not approved by any kind of agencies or FDA or American Medical Association or anything like that. So basically, if people actually have a physical ailment, an illness of any kind, they should contact a licensed medical professional for that. And then above and beyond that, if people want to experiment on themselves, then that's what we do. Is we supply the equipment for people to do experimentation. It is legal to experiment on ourselves, and your plants. You can experiment on your plants also, and it's fun to watch these things. These experiments are just amazing to see how plants respond to informational fields.
They respond as really well, just like insects.
Yeah, and insects too. Yeah. In fact, in the mid-50s, the FDA actually had sponsored some studies to find out how well radionics worked in agriculture for getting rid of bugs. And I actually have these studies in my book, Regaining Wholeness Through the Subtle Dimensions. Your readers can download my book for free. It's on the internet, and can read about the history of radionics and a lot of fun experiments that I've done. If you go to my website, www.s like in Sam, E like in Edward, like SE subtle energy, then a minus sign -5 se-5.com. Then you sign up for my newsletter. You'll get a bunch of cool newsletters too. I don't send out too many, but like when I'm doing a radio show or something like that, or then I'll let people know. But sign up for that newsletter and you get to download my book for free. And in there I go through those USDA studies, and you can see how effective they were. It was unbelievable. What they did, they did a controlled study. So they would take an aerial photograph of a cornfield, for example, and they had them all on the ground. They had them labeled so you could see which section was which. So that every other 4 rows, they would cut out of the photograph every other 4 rows, so that they would only do the balancing on every other 4 rows in the field. Wow. And then they counted the bugs before, and then they would do the balancing for a period of time and go back and count the bugs. And it was like between 80 and 90% effective at getting rid of the bugs out of those every other 4 rows.
That's amazing.
Right? That's unbelievable. I mean, it's unbelievable. So Dow Chemical Company, from what, if you read, this came from the Report on Radionics book by Russell. Dow Chemical Company had heard about these studies that they were doing for the USDA, so they did their own studies and found out that it was that effective. And so we, according to the book, the chemical company had put pressure on the FDA or the USDA to not release those studies, and so nobody ever heard about them. And to this day, people don't know that pesticides and fertilizers are I wouldn't say they're not needed at all, but they're certainly not needed in the quantities that they've said that they need them. So, and there are better ways to enrich the soil. There's just so many microorganisms, like you're talking about in your book. it's all about microorganisms, and the microorganisms are what break down the different substances in the soil and the minerals to be assimilable by the plants. And so these chemicals that they pour on the soil and the plants kill off all the microorganisms, the herbicides and pesticides. So then there's nothing in the soil to break down these minerals. So then they put more minerals on, and of course the plants do suck them up, but they don't get the full range of what naturally is available.
There was a study done in Ames, Iowa, in I believe it was like 1960, 64, 60, back in the 60s. Anyhow, they took 1 acre of land, and I don't remember how many inches deep, and then they calculated how much bacteria is in that soil, and they come up with a little over a ton.
Wow.
In 2004, they did the same piece of ground, and this was outside of Ames, and now Iowa is pretty much, they call it the corn patch for a reason.
Sure, right.
Just year after year, corn and beans and corn and beans. Anyhow, so they took that same acre of land in 2004, and there was right around 60 pounds of bacteria.
That's unreal.
That's crazy. I mean, and we're noticing that, this epidemic, I've spent a lot of time focusing on microorganisms and their function and everything. And
exactly.
They respond, with tying it back into the subtle energy.
Yeah.
They respond so fast to subtle energy. It's crazy. It's like they're meant to be subtle energy readers. But if they're not there, or if the area is only full of genetically modified organisms, they're designed not to interact with subtle energy fields.
Yeah, right.
So, by putting back the aboriginal or natural microbes back into the environment, my mentors have actually reverse genetic modification in crops just by putting the correct microbes, the original microbes, the non-modified microbes into the field. The corn loses its modification just in that growing season.
Wow, in one season.
In one life cycle of the plant.
Wow, that's just great information.
So that's where we're at right now. Not to distract too far, but that's some of the stuff that we're into right now. Is basically correcting the wrongs that this industrial world has, basically forcing the rest of the world to, like those poor farmers in India who gave in to the marketing, and there are thousands and thousands of them committing suicide because of the whole politics and their whole livelihood and generations of their farming has gone awry, so they end up killing themselves. I mean,
I know. Yeah, it's an epidemic over there. We just did in January. I just taught a 5-day workshop in India, and 2 of the days was devoted just to agriculture and ways of using subtle energies to build up the soil and build up the plants. And we've done some really interesting studies with food preservation and soil regeneration and all those kinds of things, just by sending informational fields. It's not, of course you want to supplement with EM product, for example, is the good standard microbial that's on the market, and you can replicate it yourself once you get it going, and it's just those need to be there. The basis needs to be there. We're not going to turn stones into wine or something like that,
right?
Not directly, but or was it stones into bread? I'm sure I forget those.
I think it was stones into bread. Yeah,
there we go. It was water into wine. Right. But it's an epidemic level of people. For one, the education. People have lost the generations of passing knowledge on from one generation to the next, of how by trial and error people have learned over time to keep the soil rich and how to, some of it's still there, but the academic approach has been taken over again, both agriculturally and medically by the chemical industries, and they are the ones that are teaching in the universities. They only want that information to be in the university. So people are not getting the information. They're not getting the education until they break out and start doing this stuff by themselves, and then run into problems, and then they kind of start seeking out some alternatives, and eventually they tap into all of this. There is a whole body of information, alternative. It shouldn't be called alternative, it should be primary information of how life works, but it's become alternative.
It's a whole subculture. I call it a subculture anyhow, because it's not in our normal culture. It's this whole other reality that exists.
Yeah. And, going back to the shifting universes, in my universe, pretty much everybody I know has an SE5. It's a normal, it's part of my normal reality. And in my universe, everybody knows about radionics and everybody uses it, and we all are part of a culture as such, a culture of people that where miracles are just, I don't say we take them for granted, but almost, it's just normal. They're not miracles anymore. I mean, miracles are unexplainable phenomena, basically. And when you can explain it and you understand how it works, then it becomes physics, even though it's non-physical. Metaphysics, we might call it that. But even metaphysics has a bad rap,
Right.
But yeah.
It's because of the lack of understanding, because we're not taught any of this reality we're really talking about today in academics. I mean, I didn't learn any of this until after school.
Right, exactly.
Until I started really looking at, okay, so I know medical didn't help me really get any better. It was a cup. A friend of mine gave me a cup of this really nasty tea, and my asthma and bronchitis went away in 20 minutes.
Wow.
Okay, so that was my introduction. And he goes, I'll teach you more, but you got to stop taking that poison.
Yeah, really.
And so, I dropped all the pharmaceuticals at that point. I stopped completely and said, okay, live or die, I'm not going back over there.
Okay.
And so it's been this natural world all along. Now, we have these crazy infections. Like on the break, I got detained for just a minute. One of the neighbors came over, and, lifelong of living life academically, out in the world and eating whatever and living whatever, and now we have lung problems. And so there's a place for allopathic medicine, because they're really good at killing stuff, especially infections. And so sometimes the natural approach needs a little bit of help, just because it's that bad.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I said earlier, there's a place for pharmaceuticals, and there's a place for this what now is considered traditional medicine and farming practices and all those things. There's a place for everything. It's just that it's way out of balance on that side of overuse, and even the medical industry. They talk about it in their own things. The overuse of antibiotics, the overuse of different chemicals and fertilizers in the agricultural. They know about it, and they do talk about it, but how to get from that, the pendulum swung way over to the right there. How to get it back somewhere in the middle is, we just have to go step by step and keep educating people. For me, it's all about education, and that's one thing I wanted to bring up for you. Also, I don't think we talked about this. I have an online school for radionics that I just got up this summer, and I have about 9 courses on there now, and some of them are free, and some of them are paid courses, and it's at radionic.online, www.radionic.online, and so people can go in and sign up and get some of the courses. They can go through them for free and see how things work, and I've got some good demos on there and just fun stuff. And then the deeper learning is really for people, when they have an instrument and they want to, really go the full 9 yards, dive in deep and look into this stuff, and learn it. Not just look into it, but actually learn it and practice it And so I've got bunches and bunches of courses on there where people can spend, they're taken from like 3-day seminars where I've videotaped and some of them have like 75-page workbooks. I mean, it's study, it's real learning.
Actual knowledge. Acquisition.
Yeah, and I've put this knowledge together over 30 years of just constantly searching for what works and what people have told me actually did work, and then what we can do with that information. How can we apply it? And
you said something before the break about information, and it really dawned on me how we're seeing here with the machines we have, which I'm curious if you're finding this out, because with all the crazy interferences, the EMFs, the genetically modified stuff, the social engineering, the EMF pollution, we're finding that the body is losing the ability to recognize certain signals, like minerals and vitamins and things like this. So the body's like starving to death, even though you're eating really good food. It's unable to actually recognize certain things. And then what we're doing is basically sending or updating the information to the body, and it starts to like, right. Oh yeah, that's right. There's vitamin D. Right. I just got like distracted, or it got distorted or something like that, and so then it starts to make vitamin D again.
Right, exactly, and that's exactly what is happening, and when we do the re-information process of sending this new information back, it's like a re-education process at the cellular level, and so the cells go, oh right, I remember now, and chemicals do the same thing. They can go in the opposite direction. They can make the cells forget. They can make us forget. I mean, there are chemicals that can totally wipe people's memories out for weeks at a time, right. and that is another form of information manipulation, let's call it, or whatever, in the negative sense. But what we're doing is reinforming the cells to wake back up, get out of the sleep cycle, and just turning on the alarm clock and saying it's time to go back to work.
So it's information medicine.
Yeah. In fact, there's a whole. If you look for informational medicine or information medicine, it's on the internet now. It's a term that is actually used, and information medicine is a field, and it's becoming more and more accepted. Homeopathy is a form of information medicine. It's been around the longest. It's been around longer than radionics even, and it's been tried to be. They've tried to disprove it over and over and over, but yet it still keeps working. So, because there's no physical, like when they dilute. For those of you that don't know what homeopathy is, they take let's say a substance that causes a symptom, like let's say belladonna causes vomiting, for example, and nausea. If in the physical form, and what they do, then Dr. Hahnemann figured out that if you have those symptoms naturally without taking any belladonna, and they take the belladonna and they dilute it, and they keep diluting it and keep diluting it and keep diluting it and shaking it, they call it potentizing or succussion, and it captures the information from the belladonna to where there's actually no physical belladonna left in this little vial of liquid, or then they sometimes put it on little sugar tablets. And then when people eat that and they have those symptoms, then the body goes into a healing cycle and gets rid of, like cures like is their motto, Normally belladonna would give those symptoms, but if a person has those symptoms, they would take that diluted form of it, and the body kicks it out and gets rid of it. And that's the principle of homeopathy. But it's basically the information that's left over, not the physical. And it's super effective.
This is based on liquid being the carrier of the information.
Correct.
And not the actual tangible element itself.
Right, exactly. And so we've taken that one step further, and we've learned in radionics over time that crystals are actually the carrier, or the like crystal radios, they vibrate. They actually resonate and vibrate, and can store these informational fields. If you look at a CD, for example, and it makes these rainbow colors. The reason that it makes those rainbow colors is that when you cut this film emulsion, this layer of film emulsion that's in the CD, it's actually cutting the crystals, and it cuts them in one direction or another to be a plus, a 0 or a 1. And digitally we can use that, but it's like millions and millions of tiny little crystals in that film, and that's what makes those rainbow colors, just like a prism, like a crystal, quartz crystal will make prisms in the light too. And so what we figured out is that crystals can hold these informational fields and emit them into the auric field, into our aura, or our energy field, our subtle energy field. So what we do is we then imprint something similar to a CD. They're called holographic stickers. You've seen them like on the back of your credit card, for example, or on the front. There's a little hologram in there. Well, and if you put that in the light, you'll see the rainbows also, right?
Right.
Yeah. So those actually are, again, thousands and thousands of tiny little crystals, and so we can put information in those with the SE5, and then they will emit these. So people got onto this, oh boy, I don't know, it's probably been at least 10 or 15 years ago, and started programming these holograms for different things, to the point where they've actually done double-blind, placebo-controlled studies for pain and sleep and sinus rhinosinusitis. I've got a double-blind study report from that, and they just put these holographic stickers on the body. They just stick them on, and they emit this information then and into the aura, and the body sensor can pick it up and start putting it to work. And they had like 80 to 90% results with healing, or whatever you want to call it, correcting these issues of sinus rhinosinusitis, for example, or
with the holographic.
Just with the programmed hologram. Yeah, exactly.
You carry it like in your field or on you somewheres?
Well, the stickers, they normally just put them on, like stick them on a meridian point or acupuncture point, for example. And we took that one step further. See, I started teaching this stuff back in the early 90s, and working with we had a little device called the BioDisc, which had a big hologram on it, and some scalar antennas and microchips, and it's a little bit more complex than just the hologram thing. But that evolved into, now we have a little device called the Qi Organizer, which is a frequency generator and puts out specific bio-friendly frequencies by itself. Even it just cycles through them to protect people from EMF pollution and things like that. But then we started putting these programmed holograms onto a little card or something where we could put it next to the scalar antenna, and so it emits them out into a wider field. So you don't have to stick them on your body. You can just put it in, and on the small ones they'll go out about 6 feet, and on a room balancer they'll do almost 1,000 square feet, so you can do the whole house. Oh. So yeah, it works for gardens too. We've done studies with plants, and the plants just love these things, just go wild, and yeah, so that's a different website. I have a whole kind of line of technology, and same inventor, Dr. Willard Frank, developed this originally before he died, and but didn't really ever market it. So after he passed away and I took over all of his work, then after I got the SE5 upgraded to the SE5 1000, then I went to work on used to be called the Scalar Plus when he developed it, and I developed it into the Qi Organizer and added the holograms and all of that, and so that's at QiOrganizer.com. So Qi is, like our Qi is our subtle energy, CHI, the Chinese word. Sometimes it's spelled QI, but we spell it CHI for Qi. So we call it QiOrganizer.com, and people can go to that website and see all those different things and some studies and how it affects the cells. The cells actually respond to these things very quickly. They know when there's a harmony field being generated around them, and they respond and relax and talk about de-stressing. It's incredible.
Well, our body only wants to be balanced and harmonious, and I mean, this is the greatest healing, mutating machine ever that we live in.
Yeah.
And so when you put things like this in the field, it's gonna wanna, if it's a benefit, it's gonna want to use it.
Yeah, for sure, and it does. The body is super intelligent. I mean, super intelligent. I'm just like, I wake up in the morning and I'm just so grateful for all of the processes that have happened overnight in my body, and the healing and the energy exchange and uptake of nutrients and eliminations of toxins and all that is just a miracle. I mean, it's a miracle. I don't even want to say machine because it's way beyond a machine. It's a miracle, living organism.
I'm with you. The more I know, the more I know I don't know. It's just, I feel so stupid sometimes. Unwise. It's just because all the stuff that this body is able to handle just on a moment by moment basis, just environmentally, is crazy.
Oh, it's just crazy. And the cell reproduction, how many trillions of cells are exchanging information at faster than light speed. They figured out that the cells don't communicate through chemical processes. There are chemical processes, but they're very slow. But the bulk of what happens in our body is much, much faster. It's at light speed, really. And now they're figuring out that there are microtubules and that light is the carrier. It's like fiber optics almost, and the communication lines are so quick. The things that we can do with our body totally defy chemical physics and the concept of that chemical processes are what cause us to, play a piano. I mean, the firing of the neurons and everything are just so quick that it's beyond comprehension.
There's a whole electrical system now inside of our body that they've identified. I don't know if you've heard of a book called "Genie in Your Genes" by Dr.
Oh, sure. Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
We have this electrical system, so we have the hardware for that in our body,
mm-hmm.
and they've proven already now that it is light information traveling at that speed. It's throughout our body. The figure I've heard was there's over just sitting still, just sitting in a chair still. There's over 2,000 information transmissions taking place every second just to sit still.
Wow. Right.
That's crazy. I mean, just that massive amount of information is crazy.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, it's a networking system, and as we understand information systems like computerization and internet and networking systems, it helps us to at least get a bigger grasp on how this could even be possible within our own body, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where I've really wanted to really put my focus the last few years, is making sure that we have clear information traveling throughout our body, because there's so many things that interrupt that all around us.
And one of the biggest ones is vitality, and it's kind of a nebulous concept of what vitality is, but vitality is the amount of available energy that for any given purpose. So, if the vitality reading for sleeping, for example, the amount of vitality that we need for sleep is an actual amount of energy that we need to expend to sleep, even though we're thinking we're going into a resting mode. But vitality in the sense of getting out and digging a ditch it's a different. It's not more energy as such. We still need to have a full amount of vitality. So that's one of the very first things that we check when we go through an analysis with the SE5 is, okay, what level is the vitality of this piece of fruit, for example, or of our our client, the dog. How much vitality is present, and that'll give you a really good idea of what you're up against to get them back into balance, right there. Because if their vitality is really low, the potential for healing is low. That's really what in the case of illness, for example. So let's say you had a dog and his vitality level was at 60%, and 100% would be optimal, which is very difficult to get to these days. But let's say it's at 60%. At 60%, you already know that this guy's in big trouble, even if you've never seen the dog, or the owners might not have even told you anything about him. But if you see that reading right off the bat, it's one of the very first readings we take, you know that you're up against a difficult case to get him back into balance. Whereas if his vitality is 89%, and they say, well, he's got this and this problem, you go, well, that's okay, he can handle it. His body will come back into balance and heal because he's got the vitality to expend to do that. Does that make sense?
It does for me.
Yeah.
This whole general vitality from this aspect has been very intriguing to me, because the machinery one of the machines I have, it doesn't have that capabilities, and that's what I'm really interested in with the SE5-1000 is this concept of general vitality from your aspect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you can test everything then, and you can start to say, okay, so if I need more vitality, then I shouldn't do this. I should take this or eat this or
Right.
do that.
Yeah, like one of the things we first had just only had our SE5 for like maybe 6 months. We were learning all these things and trying things out. So we got this idea. We went to a vitamin shop here in Seattle, and asked them if we could test people's compatibility with their vitamins, and before they would purchase them. And we showed him the instrument, and he said, oh, that's really cool, sure, go ahead. And so we set up a table, and so people would go around and pick up all the vitamins that they wanted to buy, and then before they would go to the checkout, we would, in this case, instead of using a photograph, we'd just snip a little bit of their hair, because it's just quick and easy, and put it inside the instrument. So I would check their vitality first, and then I would put the bottle of vitamins on. We have like an input plate where you can, extender plate, where you can, then it'll pick up the vibrations from the vitamins and the person and see what it did to their vitality. And, it wasn't our intention to sell more expensive vitamins, but basically what happened was 90% of the time people would come by and we would test them, and the cheap vitamins were lowering their vitality, not improving it or keeping it stable. And so we would say, okay, go try a different brand, and then they would bring a different brand up, and invariably it was more expensive and it tested better, but they would go for it. They'd go, you know what, I'm going to go with your reading. And we had no intention of selling. We weren't getting paid for this or anything. They didn't give us any money to be in there. We just wanted to experiment. And we discovered a brand of vitamins back then. I don't think they're in business anymore. So this was back in 1987, I would guess 1988. And a company called Rainbow Light, and I'd never heard of them ever. And they were consistently testing high, really high, on every single person that went through. 99% of people. Maybe there was one person that didn't fit with, but it was really high. So we bought some for ourselves. We tested ourselves with them and bought them, and so we stuck with that brand of vitamins for many, many years. I think they did split off. The company split in two, and then eventually they went out of business, I think. But they were food-grown vitamins, and I'd never heard of that either at the time. They were food-based vitamins, so I'm not really sure what that means exactly now. It's been so long ago, but they tested really well, and they brought everybody's vitality either up or at least stable. You don't want to eat anything or ingest anything or drink anything that lowers your vitality, basically. And that's a real easy test. Takes 30 seconds to test that.
So things like soda pops and stuff that's like almost dead.
Well, you can, and that's the other thing. You can actually test the vitality of the substance itself instead of compatibility or comparing it with your own vitality, and that already will give you the reading. But I don't think I've tested a can of pop for quite a while. Haven't even seen one or had one close enough to me to even test it. But we did test a lot of things way back when, and you'll find vitality in the 20s, 20% vitality. I mean, there's just like nothing in there. There's no life force. There's no energy in it, and ingesting that is just going to lower a person's vitality. And why would we want to do that? I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
You want more life,
right?
Not less,
right? And and some of the non-foods mask that. For example, like with caffeine, for example, like we talked about, they give you a sense that you're getting more vitality because you've got more energy until you crash. But it appears as though there's a boost, and those are usually the worst ones. The ones that just lower your vitality and you just feel tired after you eat, well, your body recovers. But these ones that boost up the energy in that kind of sense, the non-foods that boost your energy are actually stealing energy at the cellular level. And the reserves, the energy reserves. So we got to keep some energy reserves to deal with difficult situations like infections, bacteria, viruses, whatever. We need to have extra energy.
Well, I have a problem, and that I want to run by you because I have this Amish fellow that he was 38 years. He had this problem, digestion. He was just sick. 38 years.
Okay.
He started with us about 3 years ago, and he's got to feeling over that whole year the best that he's ever felt in his entire life. And then he got bit by a tick.
Oh.
Or a bug or a spider or something. Bit him. It wasn't a tick where it stayed on him, but he had a bite. And then he called in just like this panic. And he hasn't been able to get well back up again because he knew he was that way for a year. He felt just great. Like this whole community was like, what is going on with this guy? So now we're taking care of the whole community pretty much.
Yeah.
Now this guy, after this bug bite, is back down again, and he's not been recovered now for about 6 months. And so I'm just wondering, he keeps saying he's so tired, and he sounds weak. He says he doesn't even have enough energy to sleep. And
right, exactly. Remember I told you, you need energy to sleep. You do.
Yeah.
Right.
He's just in this spot where he can't work, can't run his business, and he can't sleep very well. We're picking up what's called HPU really bad, and HPU is there's so many stressor hormones coursing through his body that it shuts off the digestion, it downregulates the immune system, and his energy is just down.
Mm-hmm. Right. And did you check for Lyme's disease and all that, or? Well,
we're not finding any Lyme bacteria as active at all.
Okay.
But yet he goes to the medical world, and they had a low level Lyme, not a very high, but there is some there. We're not picking up any activity with it at all. It's more. I think he got really what we are picking up is he got really scared.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And well, basically, what my feedback is that he didn't, he was feeling really good, but he didn't have any energy reserves built up. Just what I was talking about before.
Right.
He didn't have the reserves, and those are important. We've got to keep those reserves intact and pumped up and ready for anything. And feeling good for a year is not very long for if he's been down for so long. That he didn't have the reserves, and even fear would trigger that and burn up his reserves, and so he's just wiped out. What I've seen when people are really, really low, and they don't have any reserves, then informational type work isn't as effective because they don't have anything to draw on. Like when for example, one of the things that people have done some of these studies where we'll balance, let's say, vitamin C in the body, and they do a blood test before and after, and there's more vitamin C in the blood after balancing with just informational fields. That's like totally wacky, right? I mean, where did it come from? So what we've kind of concluded is that it's not coming. It's possible it's coming from another dimension. It is possible. Because of some of the other studies that we've seen with, like, for example, Galen Hieronymus's wife did an experiment live at the USPA, which is the United States Psychotronics Association meeting several years ago, and she took a microscope and had some water on there, and you could see it live, where then she balanced the water and these crystals started actually growing in the water just from her sending this information. And I've actually replicated that myself as well. And I have some of those pictures in my book. But we don't think that that's probably what's happening, at least in the body. We think that there's stored, in this case, let's say there's stored vitamin C in somewhere in the tissues or whatever, and we send the information and the cells just go, oh, well, okay, we've got extras, we've got reserves, we can let some more out. And that's why we think, all this is conjecture, but we think that that's why there's a higher level of vitamin C, for example, in the blood after balancing when there wasn't before, or a mineral, for example. They're bound up and then they're getting released. But if a person is really low and their vitality and their reserves are really, really low, then they don't have anything to pull on. And fear could definitely cause, stressors to happen in the body, and then no reserves to pick it up, and it goes into a down spiral. So in that case, when I've seen things like that, instead of trying to do something non-physical, in the case of like radionics or, working from informational fields, I've seen where electrical stimulation itself helps get the vitality up. And Bob Beck, Dr. Robert Beck, C. Beck, not O. Becker, but because he's also into electromedicine, but Dr. Robert C. Beck, he was like my second dad. We hit it off. He was an amazing scientist, and we hit it off when I was really young. And he also had an SE5. But he developed several different electrical stimulators. One was called the Brain Tuner back in the BT5 back when he developed it, and now it's called the BioTuner.
The blood zapper?
No, this one it clips on the ears and stimulates the brain. This is how Pete Townsend and Eric Clapton and Keith Richards all got off of heroin using that, because it basically gets the brain to produce its own beta endorphins again, and which are the morphines in the body, and so then they can unhook from taking them from the outside from heroin. Yeah, so that's a whole story, and I've got some of those lectures on my other website, which is energyhealthzone.com, energyhealthzone.com, and I've got some of those old archives from Bob Beck talking about that. But he also developed the zapper, right, exactly, which would go on the wrist and zap into the blood. And of course, we've seen reports from people of a lot of people getting rid of Lyme's disease or AIDS. I've actually seen hospital studies from AIDS that Bob did. They did 14 AIDS patients and cleared them all in a little over 30 days. And some of those newsletters are also on my archives. But what I've seen is an increase of vitality, and so that's the direction I would go if I were in that situation myself, is to increase my electrical charge in the system so that there's more vitality, and then go back to doing whatever you were doing to get him back up on top, is to do the stimulation first. And those things are really inexpensive. I think they're just a couple $100 or $250 or something. They're not expensive instruments. And I've just seen so many miracle stories from those.
That's interesting because I got to do something because he knows we helped him once.
Right.
And, he went all over basically he was down to Mexico. This guy has spent, a small fortune, and we're the only ones that got him to feel like this really crazy good place.
Yeah. Right.
And then this shock of this bug bite, and it hasn't been back. So we've been really like, how can we? I'm looking all over. How can we get? Because I know it's an information issue. It was definitely a fear shock thing.
Sure.
And something
right, but it zapped his reserves. So yes, it zapped his reserves, I think, and then you got to get the reserves back up, get the vitality back up, and once the vitality's there, then his body can go into healing mode. Because the body's the one that does all the healing. I mean, the information doesn't do the healing, or even the electricity doesn't do the healing. The body is the healer, and it knows it has everything already inside of itself to basically heal anything at all. It's just got to get the right firing mechanism going from, we call it the brain, but from the intelligence, from the consciousness, and it starts directing the systems to go into heal mode. And that's not always pleasant, healing is not always pleasant because it's a process of eliminating toxins, for example, or big things breaking out. They got to get out of the body.
Right.
And, but healing, the body knows how to heal, and it's very intelligent, and I trust it. I really trust the body to heal. It knows what it's.
It just needs the information, and it needs the tools, so it can't do it.
Exactly.
Support, yeah.
Exactly. It needs the support. And so that's what I look at when I'm, working on myself even is what kind of support can I give my body for this healing process? And, of course, preventative that's what I love about the SE5 is that we're working with the informational level. We don't even work on the physical at all. We don't work on the physical. There's no connection to the physical body. We look at these subtle energy levels. So we pick stuff up way before there's any physical manifestation of it and clear it at that level, and then it never comes out. So we call it prevention, but it's really working at a pre-physical level. And that keeps things way at bay. Of course, we still have to deal with all the onslaught of, environmental toxins and food toxins and air pollution and all these things. So it's not like I'm running at 100% all the time, but I'm 100 times healthier than I was when I started with this 30 years ago. I tell you that I was dragging on the ground. I was in bad shape. That's what started me on all this. I was having migraine headaches from 1 to 3 days a week, every week, for 20 years. And so I was at. I had contemplated suicide. I had contemplated these things. It was like, I don't know if I can make it. And so that's what started me on this whole journey, just kind of like you need to find out what actually works. And when I found the SE5, it took time. This wasn't instant. I kept working, and I saw improvement over improvement. And then one of my students, actually, Dr. Frank Wyatt, he had 19 SE5s. He was a naturopath, and he had 2 clinics running, and so he was working on a lot of people. And he said, I was still having some issues with it, and he said, oh, that's an easy one. Come, let me sit down. And so he worked in a little different way than I had ever worked, and showed me how he did it, and that was the end of it. That was the end of the migraines. One session, and that was it. After 20 years. So, firsthand experience. This was, I'd tried everything, That's what started me on my whole learning path between homeopathy and acupuncture and herbology. I was doing herbs back in the mid-'70s. I was already teaching people how to gather herbs and what they were for, and they did help, but they weren't getting rid of all my symptoms. Thinking about the symptom part of it, I just had to keep at it and go through the healing process.
But if you didn't take the herb, then the symptom would come back.
Yeah, exactly. So even then, it didn't even get rid of all the symptoms. But I was trying to work at a more. I didn't know about root cause at that point.
Right.
I was pretty young, being 23 years old. I was doing my best, but it's been a big learning process for me, and I'm very happy I went on this path. I couldn't have done it without the SE5. I know that, and the brain tuner, the biotuner and the zapper and all these tools. They all have value. They all have value for different applications, and I haven't found any silver bullet yet. One size fits all, and you can do everything with one thing. But the SE5 has been my major tool by far to be able to handle so many different things. It's just amazing.
We have just a minute or two left of the show. I can't believe 2 hours goes by so fast.
That did go by fast today, didn't it?
Yeah. So any last parting words to this audience at all?
Well, just so that they can, get contact on this information, let me just go over those websites one more time. I have 4 basic websites. So if you've got a pen, write these down. The first one, of course, is se-5.com. Sign up for my newsletter when you go on the first page there, and then you'll get my book for free and kind of open up the whole world of all of this stuff. So se-5.com is the easiest one. Livingfromvision.com is my wife's website, basically, or it's our company website, but for more personal growth and enhancement of working from the inside out with your own mind. Then we've got energyhealthzone.com. That's got a whole bunch of tools, whole bunch of different tools. And then, of course, chiorganizer.com. And that one has the little frequency generators, helps for EMF. We should probably do a whole program again on EMF pollution and what people can do, not just with Chios, but...
Oh, I'd love to do that.
Yeah, because I've been really studying this for the last 4 or 5 years, and it's a big deal. It's a big deal with 5G coming out. You guys out there, do some research on 5G. We've got to wake up to this one. So So that's it. Chiorganizer.com and se-5.com.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Don. We'll do this again sometime.
Yeah.
Like you said, I really would. That'd be great about the EMF pollution, because it's good.
Yeah, it is a really good one. So, okay, sounds great.
Thank you, Don.
Thanks
talk
for having me, Will.
Again. Yes, thank you, and have a great day. We'll be back here next week, same place, same time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Will. Bye.
Bye.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.